the regular agenda, item number 2. Ask clerk to perform the reading on that, please.
A resolution supporting an application for a grant and aid from the Missouri Department of Natural Resources Land and Water Conservation Fund in the amount of $75,000 to fund improvements at Coleman Living Good Park, including renovation of tennis courts and authorizing execution of a project agreement for such purposes.
Kevin Bogie is here as our Parks and Recreation Director. Welcome, Kevin. Anything you'd like to add, sir?
Not at this time. Very briefly, the Park Board was awarded or applied for a grant to renovate the Coleman Park tennis courts in December. At that time, a resolution was approved. We've made it past the first round. This is now the second round of the application process. The Missouri Department of Natural Resources representative will be in town on Monday to tour the site and look it over further. So this grant will provide one of many documents that are required for approval.
Mr. Azier.
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Second. Mr. Azier has the motion to approve, seconded, I believe, by Mr. Pardue. Discussion, Ms. Melson.
I have a question, and this may just been a glitch, but on the request for board action, it's got that the work is expected to commence in the spring of 2011 and be completed by fall 2011. Will those dates change as the process goes?
Yes.
We're kind of looking towards 2012, perhaps?
We were hoping to hear that the grant would be approved in the spring of 2011, when in fact the federal funds were delayed. So we were notified in August that we had made it past the first round and now on to the second.
Okay. So we're really looking more towards 2012 to get the funds and to be able to have that complete.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Further questions? Mr. Pardue.
I just want to say thanks to the Parks Department on this, because I've talked to Mr. Bogie a couple of times about these tennis courts. I look forward to playing on them once they get fixed up.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're looking forward to how you do at that, too. Bring it on. We have a challenge. Okay, any more discussion on that item? We've got a motion and a second. Ask the clerk to call the vote, please.
Alderman Azier?
Yes.
Alderman Pardue?
Yes.
Alderman Hamilton?
Yes.
Alderman White?
Yes.
Alderman Nelson?
Yes.
Alderman Ertz?
Yes.
Alderman Van Buskirk?
Yes.
Alderman Mock?
Yes.
Alderman Lightfoot?
Yes.
Item number 3, please.
A resolution authorizing the city administrator to enter into an agreement with Vance Brothers, Inc. for the 2011 lightweight aggregate seal project in an amount not to exceed $144,200.
Mr. Knoll, our Public Works Director, and our City Engineer, Jason Hanson.
Thank you very much. We went over this in the study session at the last board item. We received the bid. Unfortunately, we only received one bid in the area. We had 3 contractors look at the project. However, I think due to the size and the geographic area being so close to Vance Brothers, I just don't. Guessing that they don't feel they can be competitive against their prices. We did see a small an increase to just over $2 a square yard, but we still feel this pavement treatment is the best option for us to extend the life of the existing pavement and reduce our overall pavement expenses for the city. Here to answer any other questions you may have.
Ms. Melson.
So with the increase of the $2 per square yard, is that why on the bid tabulation, the Vance Brothers bid is about $10,000 over? The engineering estimate?
Oh yeah, that's correct. We were estimating a smaller increase of $1.90 from the previous year's price. Previous year it was $1.76. So we were estimating a somewhat increase, but not that much of an increase, so that's why it's higher.
And then also, and I know we talked about this in the work session, so I don't know actually when you'll know, but on where it says that the seal project will require the contractor to use felt paper, tar paper, or some other type of material to make the straight edge. any clue to when we'll know kind of what they are going to use? And, I mean, I guess my concern is that it would be inferior quality and they put kind of a tar paper towards that edge and it ruffles up and starts tearing, or, you know, it doesn't seal it well and fix the problem of the edgy stuff that was left last year.
Well, engineers are rolling all over the place with edgy stuff. And, you know.
Now I can come up with some better terms too.
This material won't, whatever they use to create that edge line is just a temporary material they actually take up. The tar paper won't stay behind.
Oh, okay.
It's where they start, so then they take that up and you have a nice crisp line.
Oh, okay.
So we'll have a pre-construction meeting where we'll discuss that, and we probably didn't explain that well enough. This material does not stay behind. So once they're done, then they take that up. Yeah, I agree with your concern that if it was to stay behind, it would be a problem. So no.
Okay. So it actually just stays there long enough to seal and present that edge that we're looking for.
Right. I guess a good way to do it is if you were painting along the edge of your trim and you put up a piece of plastic so that paint wouldn't go past that plastic. Okay. That's pretty much what we're doing, just providing that crisp edge.
So do we know how long that's going to stay there?
Just enough time for them to put the aggregate over it and then or apply the oil and then take it up. So it's
within the time frame that they've got to be able to do that section.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Okay. So it'll be there at most an hour or two at the most. Okay. So we're giving them an hour to close the road, so I would expect that to be removed when they open it back up to traffic. That would be removed at that point.
Okay, that makes sense now. All right, thanks.
Thanks.
Mr. Azier?
First of all, is this the same company that applied it last year?
Yes, it is.
And I know that in overlay, that the quality of stone and materials make a difference in how long overlay lasts. Is this true about the same product?
Actually, the material is there for somewhat of a wearing surface and to provide some cover for the oil as well. This aggregate is higher quality than the alternate at this point would be limestone, would just be small limestone chips. This is expanded clay that's lightweight and more resistant to abrasion, so it is more effective at what we need it to do. It adheres better to the oil, stays in place longer than limestone chips, which would be the alternate. And plus it gives a darker appearance. Limestone chips would come out with a whitish, light gray appearance.
Am I correct that last year this was kind of a clay color or red color?
It'll be the same material, and it's not a completely consistent color. It depends on some of it depends upon the color of the shale when it goes into the furnace. So it does vary a little bit between a reddish to a dark brown, but that's the overall general color. Should be somewhat in the same shades.
And last year, there was some difficulty or problems with the amount of loose gravel after the project was completed. I think you indicated that you were going to maybe do some things different this year to prevent that. Do you still have a plan to do that?
That's correct. Last year, we wanted them to leave the road open the entire time. And by doing so, when they applied the oil, then they would apply the aggregate. And the first time they did it, they noticed that a little bit of oil was being picked up by some cars, so then they just increased the amount of aggregate to where it wouldn't be an issue with any of the cars picking up the oil. This year, we're going to allow them to close the road up for up to an hour, which will allow the oil to break or form a skin so that they only have to put down the minimum amount of aggregate that's necessary to cover it. And then by leaving it closed for an hour, the cars won't pick up the oil. They won't have an excessive amount of aggregate to pick up, and then you won't have that huge dust cloud in the area when they are sweeping up that remaining aggregate. So it should significantly reduce the amount of dust in the area.
Thank you.
Questions or comments? We do need a motion and a second.
Move to approve.
Mr. Hamilton's got the motion to approve, seconded by Mr. Ertz. Continued discussion on item number 3 before we vote. Mr. Van Buskirk.
Mr. Knoll, if you wouldn't mind, just for information and the general public, would you enlighten us again as to the advantage of using this on surfaces that where it can be, we can extend the life of the overlay? Would you tell us about that?
Yes, I can do that. The lightweight aggregate seal coat is provided to seal up any small imperfections, cracks in the roadway, so that we prevent water from seeping into the subgrade. Water typically will soften the subgrade, and then as vehicles go over it, that's how our potholes develop, either from soft subgrade or just from freezing and thawing during snow events at that time frame. So as we come through with the seal, apply the oil, seals up all the small cracks, then put the aggregate down to help protect some of that oil to help it last longer. This provides a cover over the top of that roadway for a minimum of 3 years, sometimes up to 7 years, where it does a very effective job of sealing up all those cracks and providing a sacrificial oil as well for the UV degradation from the sunlight, because that's another item that is degrades the quality of the asphalt, is the sun breaking down the oil that holds the aggregate together in the asphalt. So not only do we seal it up on the bottom side, on the top side, we provide the aggregate and the oil as a sacrificial oil so that it doesn't attack the actual oil that holds the asphalt together and provides the main structural part of the roadway. By doing this, we extend the life, the overlay cycle of the roadway, keep the pavements that are in decent shape in good shape for as long as we possibly can, and this is a significantly less expensive treatment than what we would need for a typical mill and overlay.
Thank you.
Mr. Ager.
Just to remind the alderman, because none of this is in Ward 2 this year, but when citizens normally see overlay, they see a new surface. A new surface is generally totally flat, looks relatively perfect, except for maybe a line running down the middle where the two joints meet. This particular process will seal the cracks, but oftentimes the crack is still visible, and sometimes it doesn't go on perfectly smooth. So they're not going to see the same kind of a surface that we see in an overlay. And that was where we got a lot of complaints last year, because they were expecting relatively a new road. And this is simply the process of sealing the road and preserving it to make it last longer, meaning the old surface lasts longer, and the old surface is still basically there. So, you know, they may be getting complaints from constituents that may or may not like it.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Further discussion? Call the vote, please.
Alderman Hamilton?
Yes.
Alderman Ertz?
Yes.
Alderman Pardue?
Yes.
Alderman Nelson?
Yes.
Alderman Van Buskirk?
Yes.
Alderman Lightfoot?
Yes.
Alderman Ager?
Yes?
Alderman White?
Yes.
Alderman Mock?
Yes.
Item number 4, please.
A resolution authorizing the city administrator to enter into an agreement with Twin Traffic Marking Corporation for the 2011 pavement marking project in an amount not to exceed $16,123.25.
Mr. Nolan, Mr. Hanson, again, anything to add?
This project is also part of the pavement maintenance program where we go through and refresh the paint marks throughout the city. We are currently using thermoplastic with our new overlays in the areas. Thermoplastic is a much more durable product, but as we go through the city, more and more of this paint will be replaced with thermoplastic to the point where we won't have to update it as often. So this amount of paint updating should continue to decrease as we go along, and mill and overlay or do the ultra-thin bonded asphalt surface, that should continue to drop as we go along. We did only receive one bid again. We heard from the other bidder saying that they that would typically bid this type of work, saying they just could not be competitive at this point due to the size of the project. Here to answer any other questions you may have.
Ms. Melson.
And I noticed, I was trying to look on here with the aggregate that you're putting down on the streets. These markings are not on that aggregate.
That's correct. Mainly the lightweight aggregate seal is in residential areas where we don't have pavement striping in the residential areas. Now, if we have paint stop bar lines, our in-house people usually reapply those.
And so, but would this type of stuff go on that aggregate?
Paint would, yes.
Paint would, but not this thermoplastic?
You could. This particular does not apply thermoplastic. This is only for paint at this time. The thermoplastic was included in the overlay bid this year so that we wouldn't have a delay time between when the overlay was completed and the pavement marking was completed.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Mock.
Move to approve.
Mr. Mock has a motion to approve, second by Ms. White. Continued discussion. No further discussion? Call the vote, please.
Alderman Mock?
Yes.
Alderman White?
Yes.
Alderman Azier?
Yes.
Alderman Hamilton?
Yes.
Alderman Ertz?
Yes.
Alderman Lightfoot?
Yes.
Alderman Pardue?
Yes.
Alderman Van Buskert?
Yes.
Alderman Melson?
Yes.
Item number 5, please.
A resolution authorizing the city administrator to enter into an agreement with William White and Sons Construction Company for the 2011 concrete repair project in an amount not to exceed $60,420 and amending the fiscal year 2010-2011 budget.
Mr. Nolan, Mr. Hanson again.
Yes, thank you. We're concerned from the very beginning after the contractor initiated work on the project and we saw the slow progress with the current contractor. We thought maybe after some time it would continue to get better, but it never did improve. So what we did was contact the third low bidder to see if they would be interested and would honor their bid prices to pick up and supplement the current contractor so that we can complete this work throughout the city, complete the overlay, complete the lightweight aggregate projects. They said they were willing to do so. So what we're wanting to do now is enter into a contract. We've prepared with them at their unit prices to complete most of the work on the major roadways. I would say Raytown Road and the areas where we plan on placing asphalt overlays and then the lightweight aggregate seal. The current contractor is still working in some areas where we aren't following them behind them with additional work with lightweight aggregate or the overlay. William White and Sons has a great history of completing work. I've known them of their work for at least 10 to 15 years where they've done work directly for municipalities. I think the current contractor, this was his first venture into municipal work, being the prime contractor and the prime contractor, excuse me. And I think that has shown some of the during the pace of the work. So this will increase our costs a little bit over the solid construction solutions, but we do believe this is the best method to complete this work as quickly as we can and minimize inconvenience to the citizens. Here to answer any other questions you may have.
Questions, Mr. Knoll, Mr. Azier.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Got a motion approved by Mr. Azier, second by Mr. Hamilton. In discussion, Ms. Melson.
With the original contractor that's doing, and that's the curb repair, correct?
Correct.
Do we have any, because, and I was trying to read this fast, but 36 days at the 45 have passed.
Correct.
And that was at time of writing this, or, I mean, is it?
Correct. They're probably completely out of time at this point. They would be
So
completely.
is there any penalty phase into there, built into that contract?
There was, but we would be to the point where they wouldn't, if we just simply tried to enforce the penalty phase, we wouldn't actually get the work done any quicker. It would just, because I think they were at their maximum capacity to get it done. All we would do was probably then be in it'd be a long, protracted agreement to complete the work from them and to either not pay them or to pay them with those stipulated items. So what we're trying to focus on is how do we get this project done from this point forward. So what we did is chose to remove a significant amount of the work from that contractor and complete it with the second contractor, because trying to enforce that, he was telling us, yes, I can get it done, but we weren't seeing any increased productivity out of his crews.
Is the work that's been completed quality work?
There has been a couple of issues that we've had to address with them, but yes, it has been quality work. I just don't think they were used to the ancillary work that came along with the concrete in terms of backfilling with asphalt in front of the curb, and then also traffic control and reseeding. I think those were some areas that they weren't as prepared to get done. So, and it shows in the fact that this is their first venture into it, and we were hoping to save the residents some funds in the transportation, but unfortunately it did save some, but it's extended the life of our project, and we're getting awfully close to the end of our paving season with the subsequent items. So that's we chose to focus on how do we get this done, get it completed.
Well, I noticed that on 59th, actually in front of City Hall here that I drive every morning, the way that they had blocked off that when they were working on that was very confusing. And I drive this every day, so I wondered kind of what was up with that. And I guess that's probably for another time about their work and stuff, and I'll let somebody else take it.
Mr. Azer.
During the process of the replacing the curbs or doing street repair, did we break a water main in one of our projects?
That was at 63rd Street and Blue Ridge Boulevard. Solid Construction Solutions was replacing a piece of sidewalk in front of, the bank. At that particular location, the bank had 4 or 5 3/4-inch service lines coming into 1 meter, and then it went into the building as one line. They grabbed one of those service lines coming in, ripped it out, caused the water leak. At that particular point, they called the Raytown Water Company. They came out, turned the valve off. The valve malfunctioned and then caused another water line break in the area. So it was a cascading events where they pulled out a water service that led then to another water main break from a water valve that I'll let Jason answer if there's any details that I left out, but it was one thing after another led to a big water main break at 63rd Street and Blue Ridge Boulevard that started with not a typical installation of a water service for that large of a building.
Was the company aware the water main was there when they dug the hole?
The water meter lid was in the sidewalk area, and they were removing part of that water meter box or structure. And when they were removing, probably the north wall of that structure is when they grabbed one of those 5 3/4-inch service lines. And those 5 lines were probably in a 1 foot, 15-inch area. There was just like 5 connections, like Andy said, to 1 meter. And it was just accidentally grabbed one of them, and then the 6-inch, 8-inch main that runs along the street, that service line was pulled out of the water main and then caused that pipe to split.
When we have a situation like that, who's responsible for the damage and paying for the cost of it? I'm sure it's not fixed for free.
In this case, the contractor is responsible, and they're working with Raytown Water Company to pay for their damages.
Okay, so, and this comes in their bond, I'm assuming, because they're a bonded company, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct. Okay. It would come from their liability insurance that they have. The bonds we have are for payment and performance.
And so the city, that's to the city, or we're not responsible for anything?
We're not responsible. If there's a lawsuit, I'm sure we'll be named in it, though.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Melson.
And I can't find it real fast, but the original amount that we were going to pay is it Vance Brothers that were taking the work away from?
No, we originally...
Oh, Solid.
Solid.
Okay, so the original amount for Solid, and then we're taking a portion of that off and giving it to White.
Correct.
So they're not getting paid that portion. So I guess my concern or question is, why the $20,000 increase? We're just taking this money and saying, you're not doing it anymore, you guys are doing it, here you go.
Well, some of that comes from our budgeting for the entire program, and then the increase from the lightweight aggregate seal as well. So that $20,000 is for the sum of our curb and gutter replacement sidewalks, our lightweight aggregate seal, our mill and overlay, and then the ultra-thin bonded asphalt. So that entire program, we were starting to exceed that entire program once we had some overrun allocations in those existing contracts. So we weren't really anticipating the lightweight aggregate to come in that high, and then we've added a little bit of concrete work along the way. But we also, in the transportation sales tax, we had an emergency contingency fund for salt of $50,000, because in the past we have had exceeded the amount budgeted significantly. This year it did exceed it somewhat, but we still have approximately $30,000 left in that fund. So we want to use $20,000 that had previously been budgeted for salt that now we don't need to complete these projects as we originally intended.
Okay.
So we anticipate that when we're done, because we also have a change order allowance in our ultra-thin bonded asphalt as well as the mill and overlay, because we anticipate some change orders, and we allocated a little bit, I think it was about $15,000 more than the actual low bid to help allocate for some of those.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, any further discussion on item number 5?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mock.
Yeah, on the map itself, Mr. Knoll, I don't know if there is another map also, but I've noticed there's a couple areas itself at 84th and Evanston and 84th in Kentucky. Did those two areas get on?
That's on the lightweight aggregate seal location.
I'm talking about curb work.
Curb work.
Curb work?
Yes. Yes, they did.
Okay, because I don't see them highlighted on here.
I know there were a couple of areas. Correct. Yes, that is included. We do plan on doing that work this year. Just for some reason is not on them. We're having the other contractor work in that area. That's one area where we don't come behind it for work, and we want to try to utilize his low unit prices as much as we can.
All I can say about 3 concrete contractors, the third one's a charm, huh?
I certainly hope so.
Okay. Further discussion before we vote on item number 5. Call the vote, please.
Alderman Asher?
Yes?
Alderman Hamilton?
Yes.
Alderman Van Buskert?
Yes.
Alderman Pardue?
Yes.
Alderman Lightfoot?
Yes.
Alderman Mock?
Yes.
Alderman Nelson?
Yes.
Alderman Ertz?
Yes.
Alderman White?
Yes.
Okay, item number 6 is a public hearing to consider text amendments to the city code relating to the comprehensive zoning ordinance. This time I'm going to reopen the public hearing. I'm going to ask if anyone on the board has any ex parte communication they wish to share at this time on this subject. None appearing. Mr. Benson, would you like to explain the application, please?
Mayor Bauer, I need to do a second reading.
I'm sorry.
Mayor
Would the
Bauer.
clerk please perform the second reading?
Mr. Mayor.
You want to excuse yourself?
Well, no, I just ex parte. We're trying to jump in on that one.
Okay. We'll go back to that point. Have you thought about it enough there?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay.
We'll let you know. Just that we had a conversation with the owner of a property on 7500 Evanston, and an email, but it will not affect my vote on this.
Okay.
I also received that communication, and I will vote based on all the information and when I get all of that.
Very good. Thank you, gentlemen. Anyone else I missed? Okay. Now I'll ask the clerk to perform the second reading on item number 6, please.
An ordinance granting an amendment to Section 1-9.05 of the Comprehensive Zoning Regulations for the City of Raytown, Missouri.
Mr. Benson, would you like to explain the application, please?
I'd be happy to. As was mentioned, this was the second reading. When this application originally came before you for its first reading on August 16th, I went through the proposed amendment at that time. Since that time, this amendment's been modified slightly in subsection 2A, which is on the page 2 of the ordinance. That language has been, or that portion of the amendment has been modified to allow a fence to be constructed on properties abutting Highway 350 within 10 feet of the highway right-of-way line for the purpose of screening trash, storage, and service areas in accordance with the Highway 350 design standards as specified in Section 29. Additionally, subsection 4C of the proposed ordinance has been modified that ties back into this, the fence at this location by requiring trees and shrubbery to be planted between the fence and the highway right-of-way line so as to substantially reduce the visibility of the fence from drivers and neighboring properties. That amendment, I apologize, it was not included in the original amendment that came before you, ties back into the amendment to the city code a few months ago related to unlicensed vehicles and inoperable vehicles, particularly in relation to auto repair businesses along Highway 350, to allow them to screen inoperable or vehicles and things from the visibility so that it allows those businesses to be brought in, some existing businesses, I should say, to be brought into compliance that are currently out of compliance, where they would have had to apply for a variance, and the Highway 350 design standards were in conflict with the location of the fence also, and so this cleans that up and actually dovetails in with that amendment that was approved a few months ago. So with that, the ordinance, as was presented on August 16th, is substantially changed with the exception of those changes I just summarized. And the ordinance before you is a substitute bill as a result of that. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions, Mr. Benson, before we go to public comment? Must have done a good job with it, John. Okay, at this time I'm going to invite anyone in the audience that would like to speak on this particular matter to approach the podium at this time. Requesting public comment once, twice, 3 times, moving on. We'll go immediately to, I can close the public hearing at this time, actually. I'm going to do that, and I'm going to go right into board discussion. Ms. White has a motion to approve, seconded by Mr. Pardue. Further discussion before we vote on this item. Mr. Azier.
Mr. Benson, can you, are chain link fences then allowed?
I apologize, I don't mean to be vague, but yes and no. It depends on the location. On residential lots, they are allowed in the rear yard or side yard. On corner lots or in the front yard setback area in residential areas, they would not be allowed. On commercial properties, they're allowed unless the design standards, like on Highway 350 or in the Central Business District, specifically prohibit chain link, but other commercial areas they would be allowed. So I apologize. The real answer is it depends where on the property the chain link fence is located and where the property is located on commercial or non-residential lots.
On a corner lot, the backyard chain link fence theoretically is on the front side of the other side of the street. Would that be correct?
It would be on the intersecting street or the side street. In the front yard setback is the area between the house and the street right away. So in that area, even on a corner lot, unless it's a legal conforming chain link fence today, chain link fence would not be located or allowed in that area. Okay, so other material, types of fence material would be allowed, but not specifically chain link would not be.
Thank you.
Okay, no other discussion? We got a motion and a second already. No further discussion. Let's call the vote, please.
Alderman White?
Yes.
Alderman Purdue?
Yes.
Alderman Nelson?
Yes.
Alderman Ertz?
Yes.
Alderman Hamilton?
Yes.
Alderman Van Buskirk?
Yes.
Alderman Azier?
Yes.
Alderman Lightfoot?
Yes.
Alderman Mock?
Yes.
Item number 7 is a public hearing to establish the 2011 property tax levies. I ask the clerk to perform the first reading of this item, please.
An ordinance establishing the annual property tax levy rate for the City of Raytown, General Operating Fund, and the Park Fund for the year 2011.
We'll open the public hearing on this subject at this time. Would anyone on the board like to share any ex parte communication they may have had on this subject? None appearing. Mr. Wilmoth is our finance director. Anything you'd like to add, sir?
Just a few notes. The levy is established every year according to Missouri law.
excuse me, the first process is that the assessor every other year reassesses value. The county clerk then compiles all that data and sends it to each city. The city uses that information to calculate their levy per the Hancock law. And the final step of that process then is having the levy actually passed and approved by the local Board of Aldermen for the jurisdiction. With the levy notice that we received from Jackson County this year, our assessed valuation has increased just over $2.8 million. The largest increase was in real estate value, and the largest part of that increase was due to new construction as assessed by the county. Removing the new construction from the increase in real estate value brings the actual value of current property within the city of Raytown to $150,000 or 0.0631%. So without the $2.1 million increase in assessed valuation, essentially the county is leaving the city's assessed value flat in real estate. With personal property, the value actually decreased by $250,000 or 0.436%, and the state assessed valuation on utilities increased $772,000, a little over 15%. When we put together our budget, we assume a 95% collection ratio. So the assessed valuation multiplied by the 95% collection ratio of the levy would mean that the city would bring in $1,053,801 and $526,325 for the parks. I think those are all the comments I have for you. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions for Mr. Wilmoth. Mr. Van Buskirk.
Would that levy amount be changed at some point? Do you have all the information in? I know that the city administrator and I spoke about this, and it's my understanding that additional information might be coming to you and that levy could change or go up or down. Is that correct? Or for the assessed value, I should say.
Right. The county submits their preliminary assessed valuation the end of August. They submit their final assessed valuation the end of September. We're hopeful that we'll get that information before the next meeting so that we don't have to have a special called meeting, but every year we always leave notice that until we get that final assessed valuation, we can't really set the levy.
Okay, so so you're anticipating that this month?
It has to be in this month because the levy has to be set by October 1st.
Okay. If, in fact, the real estate values have increased in our city, then will that mean that we will have to reduce our levy by, according to the Hancock Amendment?
Well, as I mentioned, the increase to the levy is due to the increase to the evaluation is due to new construction. And that's not a factor in the Hancock calculation. The increase based on the current valuation, assuming there was no new construction, was less than $150,000 or less than 0.06%. Based on that falls within the CPI adjustment, and therefore there is no requirement under Hancock to roll the levy back.
Most of that increase must have been on my property. Mine went up in excess of 20%, unfortunately, which that's a whole nother story, but thank you.
Other question, Mr. Wilmoth? This is the first reading. There's no further discussion. We need a motion to continue to...
I'll make the motion.
That would be continued to a date certain of September 20th. Hopefully we'll have the information. We'll have the information by then. And as much as I hate to admit it, I think my hand has been called on this one. So we're gonna hold on the motion, please, if you would. We're gonna ask for public comment. This will be a time when the audience has a chance to speak to the board on this particular item. Thank you, Andy, for reminding me.
Welcome. In my memory, this is the second time you've forgotten.
Well, let me tell you, if you only remember twice,
Yeah, that's
then we
not
need
bad.
to talk, because I can tell you there's a few more than that, but we just won't talk about it right now.
Yeah,
Because we're on your time right now.
One thing I'm failing to understand here is Mr. Williams stated that the real property value did not increase. I fail to understand how that could be because they attempted to increase mine like 20%. They also increased my neighbors and other people I knew. Now, where did this go if they didn't increase it? I had to protest mine because I can't understand how these figures could be correct. Is there an answer to that?
The county assesses the entire city. Some parts went up, some parts went down. What I'm giving is the aggregate total.
Sounds logical. Also, my next question is, you did not mention what the proposed mill levy would be, assuming that you have the correct total. Is that public information?
Yeah, I guess I didn't mention it because it's not changing, but the current mill levy is .5491, and the current recommended mill levy, based on the information we have, is .5491.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Anyone else like to address the board? Sir? Thanks for coming tonight. You've been very patient.
I just have a question. Someone said that his valuation was increased, this one said his was increased. Who here had theirs decreased? Anybody out here? Wow. I'm just flabbergasted. I'm hearing all those reports that property values gone down 10, 20, 30%, 20% increases. I live on Wildwood Lake. That's the story that's going on there. Our property is not increased. I have protested. She said, well, okay, probably. Still, the evaluation is more now than what I think is justified. I don't understand how that works. Saying this aggregate have gone down by 20.
I don't have information on every homeowner in Raytown.
I have a legitimate question.
Sorry?
I think.
Yeah, I think it's a legitimate question for the assessor.
That's not information that we're not the ones making the assessment. That's the county assessor that's making those calls, not the city of Raytown.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, but you represent us, right? And assessors not assessing correctly.
I think that
Some of us have reduction, some of us haven't. So I guess what is my recourse?
There's 3 steps. The first step when you get your notice is to call the county assessor, which it sounds like you did. If you're not satisfied with them, you're allowed to go to the Board of Equalization. I think that time period has probably lapsed by now. And if you're not satisfied with them, you can take it to the State Tax Commission. I'm thinking that process is probably in place right now because, as I mentioned before, the county has to have its final assessed valuation before the end of September because the cities and school districts and county have to set their levy by October 1st.
And we do have an appointment on that Board of Equalization from Raytown. We do have a representation from Raytown on that Board of Equalization.
Thank you.
Sir, could you give us your name and address for the record, please?
Hagan, 6845 Lakeshore Drive.
Thank you, Mr. Hagan.
Any other public comment? Okay. Now I'm going to move on past that. We can go into more discussion, or we can entertain a motion to continue to a date certain of September 20th, and I am closing the public hearing. Oops, I'm not doing that. That's 3 times, Andy. I'm now seeking a motion to continue the public hearing to a date certain of September 20th. We got a motion this time by Mr. Hamilton, second by Mr. Ertz, if I got that correct. Okay. Any discussion on moving that or continuing to a date certain of September 20th? Once, twice. Call the vote on that, please.
Alderman Hamilton?
Yes.
Alderman Ertz?
Yes.
Alderman Van Buskert?
Yes.
Alderman White? Yes. Alderman Pardue?
Yes.
Alderman Nelson?
Yes.
Alderman Azier?
Yes.
Alderman Mock?
Yes.
Alderman Lightfoot?
Yes.
Okay, item number 8, please. This is a request to amend a condition specified in ordinance number 5394-11. Mr. Benson, I believe this is yours. The floor is yours, Mr. Benson.
I apologize. On April 12th of this year, the Board of Aldermen approved a conditional use permit application for auto sales at 11900 East Highway 350. Since approval of the conditional use permit, the applicant has met with the Missouri DOT as well as city staff regarding one of the requirements specifying that curb construction occur along westbound and eastbound portions of the property, or portions of the property abutting eastbound and westbound Highway 350. The applicant is also, or property owner has also obtained bids from contractors for the removal of the shoulder and the construction of that curbing, which have come in higher than originally anticipated, as he alluded to or mentioned earlier tonight under the public comment that you heard. Because of those prices having come in higher, he has met with staff and has requested that the condition number 3 of the ordinance that was approving the auto sales be amended, as he stated earlier tonight, and rather than having to construct that curbing prior to opening, he would like to defer for a period of 3 years the construction of that curbing. In the ordinance, I'd like to that the conditional specifying or this request relates to is condition number 3 in section 2 of the ordinance, which is attached to your staff report. I'd like to direct your attention to condition number 5 as well, which allows for the applicant to submit a performance guarantee for the construction of the curbing in this case, which staff, just like we would for any other public improvement on new development. However, under that condition, it also specifies that as of August 1st of this year, we would have had the authority to use that performance guarantee to make those improvements. The applicant didn't proceed to that step yet as far as providing that performance guarantee, so staff did not have that option to use that performance guarantee for the construction. So the reason I bring up condition number 5 is that the request for an extension, it would allow the city in this case to have used those funds to build the curbing along Highway 350, and that we could use the similar type of requirement if you so choose to grant the request with a performance guarantee for a period of time, obviously beyond August 1st of this year, however. Staff is not asking for you to make a decision to grant the application or the request tonight regarding this application. Rather, staff is looking for direction from you on this. If you're not willing, or the majority of the board is not willing to entertain this request, we need go no further with the request. If you are, however, or the majority of you are willing to consider amending the previously approved ordinance, then we as staff will need to schedule a public hearing, because it will need to follow a similar process as the conditional use permit originally followed, with a public hearing before you all, and we have not advertised that for this meeting tonight. So therefore, we would have to advertise and bring this application back to you, or this request back to you at a future meeting date. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. As you know, the applicant is here, or the property owner and applicant is here as well.
Mr. Ertz.
Correct me if I'm wrong, I believe on 350 Highway we have some design money that's going to go from Sterling to Maple. As far as a 350, it was $700-some thousand on a design of 350. I believe that work hasn't been done yet, if I'm correct, or that design has not come back to us.
That's correct. The Missouri DOT is in charge of releasing that request for proposals to select a engineering firm or design firm for that work, and that RFP has not been released yet. It should be coming up here in the next month or so.
Yeah, I would think that it might be a good idea if we're going to be, which would, along with our what we just passed earlier in the year, which took us from Blue Ridge Boulevard to Maple, that one goes from Maple to Sterling. This would be like the last section of 350, where this property is located, does not yet have anything.
We're actually talking two different things. The Maple to Sterling is design funds for design, engineering, design to look at some traffic issues, and also out of the Highway 350 corridor plan to look at the potential of realigning the recommendation out of 350 corridor plan of realigning the westbound lanes onto the eastbound lane alignment. And there's three sections where that occurs between 435 and 470, two of which are in either all or partially in Raytown. So it will look at that part. It won't actually be, those funds won't actually be used for construction, but just for design purposes.
But it could change what we would want done on the rest of 350, since we're just looking at from Sterling to Westridge at that point. Is that true?
It won't change what we want done, because it won't change. We don't anticipate the design of the highway will change. It's just a matter of the width of the number of lanes or the location of the westbound lanes. But the design itself won't.
But where you put the curb
is not intended to change.
Will not change, is what you're saying.
Correct. Well, unless the westbound lanes get realigned onto the eastbound lanes, and then that whole eastbound side gets totally rebuilt, yes. In that case, yes, the curbing would get
Which gives
removed.
me to think that maybe there's a good reason maybe we should.
The engineering funds, though, that we have won't impact this property because they're from Sterling to west to Maple, so they won't come this far.
I'm assuming we'll get it all done eventually, but yes. Right.
At some point, possibly, yes, that's a possibility, but not a guarantee at this time.
Okay.
And the time frame for even as a possibility is a long term, with funding limitations the way they are.
Okay. I have noticed quite a bit of work done on the property. I noticed the islands. I noticed quite a bit of cleanup. Having formerly driven by there a lot of times, I know the property has improved greatly. As far as if you're looking for a nod, I don't see any reason why. Well, yes, I would love to see it all done. I would love to see the curb work and all that done, and I believe it should be put in there with a performance bond, like you said, and all that stuff, just so that the city knows that it will eventually be done. But that said, I think I'll just listen to the rest of the aldermen for now. So.
Okay.
Ms. White?
Well, I would have to agree with Alderman Ernst. I don't have a problem with the delay as long as we do have the performance guarantee in there. I think that's huge.
Mr. Lightfoot?
I agree with them. I would want them to go forth. I mean, I've noticed a lot of changes and a lot of money being put into it, and it's definitely cleaned up. And I'd hate to not grant them the extension and have it just sit the way it is now and not be used at all. So I would put a performance guarantee in there, but I would be willing to go ahead and grant the extension.
Ms. Melson?
So the applicant is not wanting number 3 removed, but just amended.
That's correct.
And what you're suggesting is if we amend number 3 to add in the portion of number 5 where it talks about performance guarantee.
That's one option, yes, to do it that way. The other option is the conditional use permit was issued for a period of 10 years. The other option is to limit the conditional use permit for if the change condition number 3 is granted, to change the limit of the conditional use permit to 3 years or whatever period of time they would have. So they'd have to come back and renew their conditional use permit and have that construction done prior to that time. That would create more time for them, more work for them, because they'd have to come back through the complete conditional use permit process, which takes about 80 to 90 days. So plus the work on the front end for them. So by amending number 5, it actually keeps it a little cleaner for them and less work for them down the road. But there's two options either way.
But what they're really looking for by the letter is to be able to get the business open as quickly as possible.
Correct. As they have indicated to us, right now they cannot open and generate revenue coming in that will help them pay for these improvements. Right. And so by allowing them to do the other, they'd still have to comply with all the other conditions.
Right.
And assuming they do, it would allow them to start selling cars in this case and generate some revenue, which then will help them be able to pay for the curbing construction that's specified as condition number 3.
So all of the other conditions, they're okay with that as far as being able to complete those?
They haven't indicated to me that they're not, and that they've indicated to me that they're acceptable to all the other conditions. We haven't discussed any of the others.
This one just seems to be a hurdle.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Van Busker.
So if we do this, it would have to come back for a public hearing and go through that process again.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay, I would be in favor certainly of doing that.
Again, we're not asking for anybody to make a decision tonight. It's just whether you're willing to consider the change at a public hearing.
By considering, then the applicant has to incur more cost to go through the process.
That's correct.
Has he been made aware of that?
Yes.
Okay.
Which is why we requested your guidance on this. We didn't want him to incur cost if there was no consideration that there would be no. But by viewing that there is some, you aren't predisposing on how you're going to vote to this applicant. You're merely saying you will consider it on the merits when a revised conditional use permit comes before you. And in my looking at, I think 3 and 5 are going to need to be modified, and we're going to need to hammer 5 out with this applicant before it, because it's over. He didn't perform by August 1st, 2011, so that condition can't be met anymore. So it's going to come back before you with either a new deadline date and new terms of that performance guarantee. So you will be seeing a modified both on 3 and 5 if it comes back before you.
And the length of extension has not been specified yet.
No, that's his recommendation is going to be 3. This board would have the right to set whatever time frame it would find appropriate. We're not predisposing that the applicant will get the 3 he's requesting, just that it will be considered, and if that's his position for 3, he can give the reasons why. The next public hearing, he has justification for that time period, but it will be totally discretionary with this board what amount of time they grant and for why and what condition.
I've had some discussions with the gentleman before. We previously had an application. I have concerns. Number one, I saw extremely high weeds up until a week ago. All of a sudden, before this came out, the weeds were high on the property. It was an eyesore. We talked earlier about a precedent being set, and you're now talking about a huge precedent being set here, because we have other businesses along 350 that have in fact gone through with what they said they were going to do, and are not coming to us asking for this sort of variance. And even if we granted a 3-year, in all fairness in the business, you got to make $140,000 in profit to pay for the improvements within 3 years in a car sales business. I like the gentleman, but I have great concerns. One, because I think we could establish a dangerous precedent for this city. We are trying to improve our properties along 350. We put in design guidelines for that. We have not seen conformance to date. We've been over backwards the last time. We haven't seen conformance to date. In fact, weeds, it's been an eyesore. That's in the entrance to our city. And I'm okay with going forward to further consider it, but it's not a slam dunk in my opinion. That's my 2 cents. Mr. Azier.
My question would be, in a 2-year period, if they were to go out of business, then what would take place?
If we have the performance guarantee, we would be able to theoretically use those funds to construct the improvements, take those funds and have those improvements constructed. If they don't perform within the period of time, whatever the time period would be, if it's established, whatever that time period would be.
Would you explain to me exactly how that works? Where do the funds come from? How much money is it? I mean, I'm not...
The performance guarantee would be, in effect, a bond, or it could, depending on the type of... It's a guarantee that's provided to the city either in the form of a bond or letter of credit or cash that sits in an escrow account, whatever form is acceptable to the city under our codes, in the amount that's equal to the cost of construction. So based on their bids, They would provide those bids to our Public Works Department, who would review those to say, yes, they're reasonable, or no, they're not reasonable, whatever, to make sure that the amounts of funds, and then they would go to a bank or a company that would provide the guarantee, a bond or letter of credit, as I mentioned, and in that amount of that construction, the city would be named, would be named or specify that we can use those funds if the property owner in this case fails to make those improvements by a given date, and at which point if that failure occurs, we then as the city would have right to use those funds for that purpose of constructing those improvements. I don't know, Mr. Willis may have, there's more details, technical details of it, but in a general sense, that's the process. And it's
that was a good general description, but I think the form of what we get will be an important consideration that you'll consider in your motions. Or we haven't got it, I hadn't seen it presented here before August 1st, and so we're still looking to see what it is that the applicant will have to try to guarantee that performance to you.
And this is something we as a city get with any new development involving public improvements, where there's new streets, sanitary sewer, storm sewers, things like that. We get performance guarantees to make sure things are constructed not only on time, but in accordance with city code, to make sure that they're not just that they're constructed, but they meet our codes when they are constructed. So it's not a unique process at all.
No, but we usually get that in the form of bonds, to answer your question, Alderman Azier. So if it's not coming in a bond in this, we want to see, and he gave some alternatives here, letter of credit or something that we could trigger just with notice of default. So that's what we would be looking for here. I don't think we've received it yet, nor do we know.
Yeah, and I understood, I had the general understanding of that. I just wanted to understand how that's created. So basically, it's kind of like a bond that you take out if you're a company, you're bonded. So basically, he would pay for a bond guaranteeing, and if he were to default on that, then the bonding company would have to fork over the money.
If we get it in a bond form, that's correct. Otherwise, we want to see some alternative security to answer your question head on as to how we'd have these funds so we can trigger it. So that when I said to you I thought both conditions need to be modified, that's exactly what I was thinking of, is I want to see the form of this performance guarantee. I can answer a question just like that on reconsideration.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, further discussion? Mr. Mock.
Yeah, I know there was public comment at the first of the meeting, but I'd like to know about the 3 year extension. What was that all about again? Could we have him back up to the podium?
If you'd like to come up, David.
Okay.
State my name again, Rick Ellner, turnover owner of 11900 Highway. In May of 08, when I purchased this property was an eyesore. I went in conjunction with John Benson's help and everybody's agreement as far as what we need to do to get this up and running for the auction business. In short, this has nothing to do with you folks. I had a partner in the auction business that was a crook. I'm not going to be related with a crook doing stuff like they did business, so I shut it down. I shut him down. I'm still sitting on a piece of property that's $2 million, has 2,000 linear feet of highway. We have ran low on funds. When we came back in front of you, Mr. Mayor, in April and asked for this, we talked about doing the curbs inside the parking lot, curbs and gutters on the highway, and all the landscaping. Because our first intentions, what we saw was our bid was at $40,000 to take care of the highway. Spoke with a bonding company. That was no big deal. We could get a bond for $40,000. Landscaping, no problem. As we got in with MoDOT, and they drug their feet, and they drug their feet, and drug their feet, we then learned we were looking at bids at $140,000. And if you notice, if you pass there so much, and you can critique my property, then you've noticed the movement forward I've done with the curbs on the inside of that property, pickup around the property. If you want to see an eyesore, see what that frickin' Metro bus has done to my property. And that's an eyesore. And to answer you on a bond, it's very, very simple. I apply for a bond, you're the recipient of the bond. Basically, I have 3 years to complete the work that's constructed in that bond. At the time of that time, when that is not done in a manner, pardon me, I'm nervous, I'm really pissed. And if it's not done in 3 years, the city has the right to revoke that bond and take that money. You know, when you talk about the weeds and stuff at my property, you know, we have went to a skeleton crew to try to keep my families that are important to me employed. All I'm asking for is to give us 3 years to make this thing look like you want it to look. We know, and just like I said from day one, I don't want to own something that looks bad. I want it to look nice. I wouldn't have kept putting money into it if I didn't have intentions of doing what I was going to do. But when the bond, when the estimates came back, and MoDOT comes back, and then we're getting close to our cutoff of August 1st, I'm not going to buy a $140,000 bond, and it gives me 3 weeks to work with. It's not bad. That's not a good business move on my part. I know IHOP has got consideration on theirs. I drive up and down the road. I look at all these car lots. It's a joke to think about the property that I own. I put more money in that property than half of these buildings are worth on 350. I mean, it's a joke. I mean, I'm trying to do exactly like the city's asking me to do. But the thing is, if we keep putting me off, bank does not get put off. You know, the first of the month, I still owe them $13,000 for that building. Next month, $13,000. They don't want to be put off. What's going to happen is, if I get put off with the city, the bank's going to take that building back, and then the city's really going to have an eyesore.
Did you get your answer, Mr. Mark?
And I'll tell you, each and every one of you, I pour my heart and soul into what I do for work. And I can look every one of you in the eye. You'll never find a more honest businessman in this town than I am. I lost my ass on that auction. Because when I found out what that guy was doing and the way he was doing people, I did not want to be a part of it.
See.
Operations for new asset motors, and I guess the word that confuses me the most with this whole situation is possibility. You guys said there might be a possibility you get to us with the curb. We don't feel, after the research of the grant that is being given, that you're starting, from my understanding, from Blue Ridge and coming towards us. For the existing businesses that do not have curbs, if you take the amount of money that we have been, given a bid for by Tim Reed, which is a contractor that does a lot of business for the city, so we feel it's a very justifiable bid, that there is no possible way that from the start of where you're starting, that you could complete this project and us be involved in it. We are not opposed to doing this by any means. We just feel that the progression of it, why do we have to be the standing point when, if you look at that triangle the way it is, you're going to drive up, you're going to come down 350, and you're going to have nothing, nothing, us, nothing, nothing. I mean, that seems like more of an eyesore to us than what you guys are trying to justify in the fact of making us do it. There's another businessman around the has a business that is a car clinic, so he works on cars. He wants to start selling cars in his parking lot, whatever. He now has to come back to you guys to get a business license and do the exact same curbing. He runs along 350, and then the side street, I'm not going to speak of what I know the name is, Rick's Clinic over there. So I went and met with him the other day, the owner, and I said to him, I'm under the understanding you guys are trying to get a business license to sell cars too. What's yours? He's like, you know what, I'm not even, I said, when you get your bid, if you get other people, he said, I'm really not progressing with it because there's no reason for me to spend that much money to do what I want to do when I already have his license. So you're not, progressively encouraging people to come and open businesses here. And I understand that, you know, your general fund comes from sales tax from utilities, or your taxes from utilities, and your sales tax. As a car lot, we don't pay sales taxes directly to you. I hope that that's not an effect in what we do, because you know, our sales tax are not, you know, revenue completely to you. So I just feel that the amount of information that we have seems like a lot less than what we're getting back in regards to a completion. You know, I mean, if we get a bond, we were in the process of getting that then, but knew after we got that first bid, it was like there was no possible way we cannot make enough money within the time frame of opening to do that. So we just, I mean, and who knows how far you guys will even get with the amount of money you have coming. That possibility word scares us even more. You know, that's not a positive word to hear. So.
Okay. Where are we in discussion here? Further questions for the applicant, the gentleman? John, anything else you'd like to add?
I'd just like to clarify one that they've mentioned about the city making improvements down the highway. When I was responding to Mr. Ertz or Alderman Ertz's question, what I was referring to of not knowing when was whether or not the realignment of westbound 350 would be, whether westbound 350 would be a realigned. I wasn't alluding to or talking about whether the curbing would be constructed or when it would be constructed. Whether westbound 350 gets realigned or not is truly up in the air, because the majority of that segment where it is split is in Kansas City. And the previous development to the east of the city limits of Raytown that's in Kansas City Kansas City was not proposing to realign westbound 350. If they do not realign westbound 350, we do not realign westbound 350 in this segment. So it stays along their property. It stays exactly the way it is. So the curbing would be built. If westbound 350 gets realigned, the curbing still gets built, period, on both lanes. So that part is not an if question. It's a matter of when that occurs. We will continue to pursue grant funding, which is what we've received from Blue Ridge coming to Maple, to putting curbing on one side along with the bicycle and pedestrian trail. That project ranked very high for various reasons that this location on 350 Highway currently won't rank as high until we get closer down, extending the curbing and bicycle pedestrian trail, those type of amenities closer to their property, and then it will start to rank higher. And so when those grant funds will become available again, that's federal government, and we have to wait for them to provide that transportation funding. So I just wanted to clarify that point. So it's not a matter of on the curbing, on the improvements that are tied in with them, of if it's an if, it's more of a when. The other part I'd like to add in is other private development or development along the corridor. We've required the same improvements. Aldi's that opened that you mentioned earlier tonight, they put in the curbing along their frontage of their property. An auto sales business at Raytown Road and westbound 350 that opened, I believe, today, put in the curbing and took out a drive, or two drives actually. They've been required at IHOP. When they open, they're actually deferred. Their curbing will come in as part of phase 2 of the Raytown Crossing East, which is the whole former Dodge dealership and the former BP Amoco property. So they're required to do it. Theirs was deferred until phase 2 for the IHOP portion because of a driveway realignment or consolidation with Bank of America that needs to be dealt with first, and having to wait for Bank of America's approval on that. So there were some extenuating circumstances as to why IHOP did not build their curbing on 350 at this point. So it's not that they're the first property to be required to do this. There's been others that have done it and have been required to do it. So,
Mr. Pardue.
Yes, I think the applicant does have a good point with a lot of these places on 350 have had tax incentives and other things that have helped them open their business. I don't see how this is any less of an issue. I mean, he's just asking for a little assistance to open the business, just like, I mean, it's a much less request than a CID or a tax incentive. So, I mean, I look forward to seeing this move along if we can and just see what we can do for him.
Mr. Ertz.
Thank you for clarifying all that out there. That was pretty good. As far as finding out exactly what's going on, I do realize this property has a lot of frontage on it. Having heard maybe a contractor's name mentioned for the curb work, I would like to see more than one bid when you decide how much money should be put into the performance area, so that we have some good numbers that could possibly, rather than, we won't just take one person's bid that may not be in business 3 years from now. I think the problem with what is now, with held back, if only 40,000 was put into the performance bond the last time, it wouldn't be enough to complete this project anyway. If it's 160,000 or 140,000, you know, it wasn't enough in there. And I think, I don't know why that number was put in so low the first time, you know, if it wasn't enough to cover the distance, but maybe if we could just do some due diligence, should this move forward.
Yeah, and I know they've gotten multiple bids. We haven't seen them all. They haven't shared them with us, nor have we asked for them or that they needed to share them with us, but they've gotten multiple bids. But that's also why our Public Works Department reviews the bids to make sure that they include what they need to include, and the pricing is consistent with what other pricing we're seeing on similar projects. So
we spoke with Mr. Benson in regards to that, to show him that 2 or 3 bids for that reason. I'm not new to business in regards to $20,000 bid, $1,000 bond, and you guys are all going to, you know, to get 3 comparable bids and take the average bid for our performance bond. And common sense to me was what I would make sure that would cover it.
And then to add insult to injury with the whole situation, we went to our bank to ask them if, you know, we could basically maybe borrow the money against from what we have as equity on it, and our appraisal came in very, very low with the comparables in retail. So we're barely, I mean, we lowered the price of our property down, hope that we sell it. It's listed with law. They are aggressively trying to do something with it. We cannot get it down. The appraisal came back, so we don't even have an equity position now to even borrow against to make these improvements. So financially, I think all of us can understand that even though this, you know, a massive amount that's been put into it so far, that's not coming back, and we don't want to continue to put more money into it when we're not going to get it back. Because that clock is realistically telling us that that property would sell for 1.1 to 1.2 million, and we obviously have more on that than that on it, and the improvements we've done. So very disappointing on that side also.
Okay, well, there's been considerable discussion. Hopefully, Mr. Benson and the applicant have, they can take the next steps and see where it goes. If it comes back before us, we'll certainly entertain the subject at that time.
I think based on the comments I've heard from the board, it seems like the majority of you are willing to consider it, so we'll move forward with scheduling a public hearing for a future meeting.
You don't need an action necessarily, you just need a heads nodding.
Just head nodding is fine.